presentation. So I think that this will help a lot of people, bro. So the best way to prepare for a listing appointment is to ask the seller some questions.
So notice there, like I didn't ask permission. I'm like, we're doing this and I'm going to be quick. I think a lot of people use pre-qual in the wrong way. They use it as disqualification, right? And that's not really...
It's all about the motivation right there. Look, I literally just told you like 3 seconds ago that I'm moving to Arizona.
I see a lot of agents spend so much time spinning their wheels on people that aren't certain about what they want to do yet. Welcome back, Novello Nation, to another episode of the Aaron Novello podcast. On this episode, myself and my boy, Mr. Jose Luis Morales, are going to have an in-depth conversation about how to prepare for the listing appointment, right? And what I'm aware of is, preparing for a listing appointment is critically important if you want to be effective and efficient. According to the Association of Realtors, if an agent goes on 100 listing presentations, they only actually take 20 listings. And that's pretty interesting. It's only a 20% conversion ratio. Now, my personal conversion ratio is about 80, 85%. I know Jose's is similar. And, we worked on that over an extended period of time as he was coming up in the game. And now he's a listing machine. So, I'm excited to have this conversation and add value to the community. How about you, Jose?
I'm excited too, because I think it'll help a lot of people. I remember back in the day, bro, when I used to get a listing appointment, I would be so nervous because I didn't know how to prepare for the listing appointment, or I didn't know what to do at the listing presentation. So I think that this will help a lot of people, bro. So
yeah, 100%. What comes to mind, I remember having conversations with you, when we first started working together, where you felt like, man, I'm like half the presentations I'm having to go back a second time. Right. And it was just not it was like inefficient. You had the hustle, you had the will. It was just that you're spinning your wheels a lot, right? Going on a lot of these presentations and not getting the desired outcome. And once we made a little tweaks, right? One of them specifically being pre-qualifying upfront so we can gather as much information as possible and also use the pre-qualification in preparation for going on the listing presentation as a mechanism to sell, which we'll get into and kind of assumptively close. Then you started to convert at higher and higher levels. So let's walk through this, bro. When somebody reaches out to us or when we're cold calling and we set an appointment, talk to me about, the preparation that goes into that. So when somebody says like, yeah, come over, do you just like run over right away and you're like, all right, cool, I'll see you at 3?
No, not at all. And I think that's what I used to do at the very beginning. Like somebody would call me or I'd call them. They're like, hey, I want to sell my property. And I'd want to go over there immediately. But the best way to prepare for a listing appointment is to ask the seller some questions. Some people call it to pre-qualify the seller. Some people call it like an input. I've heard it like, they're like, oh, I have an input form where I ask the sellers a series of questions. So basically, the best way that I learned how to prepare for a listing appointment is to pre-qualify the seller, ask them a series of questions about their situation so that you know what you can do to be a best service to them. So it starts off with a transition. Like let's say that you set the appointment. So there's a 5-step listing process, and we went over that in our last video. Step number 1, you set the appointment. Incoming call, outbound call, set the appointment. Step number 2, you pre-qualify them, meaning you ask them that series of questions. Step number 3, you send a pre-listing package, meaning some information, which we'll cover in this video. Step number 4, you call to confirm. And step number 5, you present. You follow this process, it increases the chances of you taking the listing, and it also improves your listing presentation ratio, meaning based on how many listings you're going on, how many of you're taking, and how many of them are you taking on the first try. So the pre-qualification starts with transitioning from setting the appointment to transitioning to the script. This is the way I usually like to do it. I say, well, look, Aaron, before I come out, there are a number of questions I need to ask you. I just want to make sure that I'm fully prepared for our meeting and I could really be a best service to you. Is it okay if I ask those questions now? And my intention in asking that in that manner is that the series of questions is really all about them and helping them achieve their goals and helping them get closer to whatever it is that they want to do. So Aaron, walk us through, man, what happens after you transition, bro?
Yeah. So, and I love that. And as I'm getting ready to walk through, I'm more than happy to do that. When I asked you, like, hey, when somebody calls and just says like, or you're making an outbound call and you book an appointment, do you just automatically go out? Your eyes got really big and you looked at me like, that's ridiculous. Like, why would I ever do that? Right. So it's important for people to understand that when me and Jose are saying that we do this every single time, it is absolutely every single time without exception. Right. Because in my professional experience, in those times when I imagined that I was going to make an exception, it never ends up working out in my favor, and it's not a productive use of time. So if we're either making outbound calls or it's an inbound call and we book an appointment, in preparation for connecting, Jose, I just have a couple really quick questions to ask you just to make sure that I'm fully prepared and I could be of the best assistance to you and your family. And I'll be brief because I know your time is valuable. So notice there, like I didn't ask permission. I'm like, we're doing this and I'm going to be quick, right? So then we can transition. And they're like, sure, right? And in my mind, the way that I'm thinking about this in pre-qualification, I think a lot of people use pre-qual in the wrong way. They use it as disqualification, right? And that's not really the purpose of pre-qual. The purpose of pre-qual is to gather information, the who, what, where, when, why, and how with regards to this prospective move. And also use it as a mechanism to gather, potential objections that may come up, things that you have to be prepared for when you meet with them, whether they're going to meet with another agent, whether they're going to ask you about the professional fee or the length of the agreement or things of that nature, or what are you going to do to market the home? And then also a little bit more advanced as we start to assumptively close and move things forward. So once we say that phrase to transition, then they're like, sure. And then I start to systematically ask questions. And in everybody's mind that's watching this, I want you to think about this as though there's like a door and it leads to another room. And we don't leave one door until we don't leave one room until we are complete in one of the rooms. And what the rooms are motivation, time, and decision makers. So what's the specific motivation? So once they say okay to asking, sure, like it's okay, ask me questions. So the first question I have, Jose, is I'm very familiar with your geographic area. I'm sure your home is lovely. Right? Hopefully I'm not being too straightforward. Was there any particular reason you and your family were even considering selling? And what is that question around, Jose?
It's all about the motivation right there. That's getting into the motivation now. What comes up to me when we talk about motivation, and this is where some people get caught up, they'll read a script and the script will say, when you sell this home, where are you moving to next? But like, if you already talked about that in the appointment, like you may not have to like say, hey, Jose, like when you sell this property, where are you moving to next? Because they might be like, Jose, look, I literally just told you like 3 seconds ago that I'm moving to Arizona. Instead, you can rephrase the question and say, well, look, Jose, I know that when we spoke, you were kind enough to mention to me that you're looking to move to Arizona because you want to be out and be closer to family. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. Yes, that is correct.
Perfect. And then right behind that, to dig into motivation, a question like, well, and tell me, because my job is to help you. It's never to talk you into doing anything. Is it an option for you, Jose, to not sell this home and still move? Like maybe like rent it or just keep it as a secondary home? And then quiet. Because I don't want to leave that room of motivation yet until I'm clear that the motivation is very strong. Because as we're taping this, we're in an environment in which economically things are changing, and it's going to become very, very important. One of the key critical skills that we need as agents is this ability to pre-qualify at a high level and to be able to kind of flesh out 8, 9s, and 10s in motivation. Because if it's not a compelling kind of reason as to why they're going to sell some sort of life event, then they're probably not going to be willing to put up with a difference in market dynamics and perhaps a difference in their expectations as to how much they're going to be receiving on their home versus what they could have got, 6 to 12 months ago.
Now, this is another thing, like you have to be listening to when you're having the conversation with their client. Like let's say in the appointment, they tell you, oh, this is a rental property for me, or this is a property that is an estate. You're not going to say, Jose, once you sell this property, where are you moving to next? Because that doesn't make any sense, And I hear that all the time.
Do you remember when we were like Yeah, do you remember we were role playing one time and I was like, Jose, and you're like, what? I'm like, you have a really good brain, bro. And you're like, I'm like, you should use it. And you were like, whoa, because you were doing that.
Because you get so caught up in like, okay, what does the script say next? Instead of like, okay, he already told me that this is an investment property for him and that, or that this is an estate. So you have to ask yourself, what you're really looking for is the motivation. And there's different ways to dig for this motivation. So if I'm talking to somebody that owns a rental property, instead of saying, where are you moving to next? I'm going to say, well, once you sell this property, are you looking to reinvest the proceeds into something else, or are you just looking to cash out on this investment? What am I looking for right there? I'm looking for motivation. So if they say I'm looking to reinvest the proceeds, I may ask like, okay, great. And once you do that, are you looking to reinvest those proceeds here locally, or are you looking to move that money somewhere else? No, I'm actually looking to move it out of California. Okay, great. Now I've got some sort of sense as to what the motivation is. I can continue to dig deeper on that. Or if they say, no, look, I'm just looking to cash out, you may ask like, okay, great. And if you don't mind me asking, like why cash out on the property, and why not just keep the property as a rental property? I mean, or you can say like, well, Jose, gosh, it sounds like a great rental property. I mean, it sounds like it's been producing tons of cash flow for you. Like, why not keep it versus cashing out? And then I'm like, well, look, I'm really tired of being the landlord. I'm tired of like having to manage this property. I want to simplify my life. Boom. What does that give you? Motivation. Starts to give you the reason why they want to do what they want to do.
That's exactly right. And when you break that word down, motivation, it's motive to take action. It's a reason for doing something. And it was interesting because as you're speaking, those exact things were coming up for me. It's like, well, I imagine this has been a really good rental for you. And I know the rental market's, been very strong over the last 12 months. So hopefully I'm not being too straightforward. Was there any particular reason that you wanted to cash out versus just continuing to be a landlord? And then quiet. And they'll tell you, well, like I got maxed out depreciation. I got to cash out and move on to something else. Okay, cool. And is your intention to do a 1031 exchange and then repurchase something else? Or are you just cashing out completely? So what me and Jose are demonstrating to you is we want to get very, very clear on the why first, motivation, right? The motive to take action, the reason why somebody's doing something. And personally, I'm not going to move on to my next line of questioning, which is around time, until I'm clear on that.
The other thing I wanted to point out, bro, is I've seen other scripts, and this is not me talking bad about anything else, but the way that we're teaching you guys to do it is I've seen other scripts that are like, the first question that they start off with is, if what I say makes sense and you feel comfortable and confident that I can sell your home, are you planning to list your home with me? And sometimes that's too direct of a question for some people. I remember when I would ask that, people would be like, well, Jose, look, I haven't even met you. I don't even know what you look like. I don't know anything about you. And it may come off like it's too strong. So the reason I like to start off as motivation is it gives me a little bit of time to better understand their situation. I'm still going to ask the question, if what I say makes sense, are you planning to list it with me? I'm just going to ask it at a different time instead of asking it at the very beginning, because it gives me a little bit of time to fully understand their situation and almost like make it more about them than about me.
100%.
And that's what you want to do.
And that's the key right there, is that it flips it, right? When I begin to ask questions about Jose and what he's looking to accomplish and why, and specifically why it's important to him at this stage in his life that he accomplish a particular goal or objective, what I'm doing is I'm coming from a place of contribution where my intention is to serve. If I lead with a question that's about taking, it's about me, that is very indicative of what my intention is. My intention is to take. It's not to serve. So we're still going to ask that question. We're just going to ask it in a different way that's more palatable, and we're going to ask it towards the end of the conversation, right? And I think that's a critical point for people to be aware of, because the tendency for a lot of people is to lead with I, me, and what's in it for me. And I think that's backwards. And to your point where it's like, hey, if what I say makes sense, and you feel comfortable, you plan to listen to me when I see you tonight at 6. That's like going on a blind date, knocking on the door and being like, hi, are we going to smash tonight? It's like, what? Like, I don't even know you, bro. Like, we didn't even have a conversation. We haven't gone out to dinner yet. Like we didn't even relax. You know what I'm saying? You got to build a little rapport first, right?
Yeah.
So, we wouldn't do that in other areas. So it's like, well, why are we doing it here? Right. So once we're clear on motivation and we're asking a lot of digging questions around motivation, and a key phrase there is, my intention is to help you. It's never to talk you into doing anything. So is it an option for you to not sell this home and still move, maybe like rent it out or move? Because I want to get that clarity. I see a lot of agents spend so much time spinning their wheels on people that aren't certain about what they want to do yet. And what's true is that the bad leads or warm leads, okay leads, they hide the great ones. They hide the people that are like, Jose, I'm definitely selling. I want to get on the market in 30 days. It's not an option for me not to sell. Okay, great. We're dropping everything. We're going to move things around and we're going to meet with you because it's very clear that, you have a need that we can service. So once we're clear on motivation, then we start to move to time, right?
I wanted to add a couple things on the motivation before we move on to time. Understanding the motivation can actually help you prepare for the appointment. I'll give you guys a couple of quick examples. Let's say that they say that they're doing a 1031 exchange. You can dig a little bit deeper. You can say, well, great, do you already have a 1031 exchange company, or would you like for me to recommend somebody? Boom. What are you doing right there? You're adding value to their situation. Adding value. If they say, great, I'm moving to Texas. Great. Do you already have an agent out there? Would you like for me to make a recommendation out there? So whenever you're going out to the appointment, now you've got all this information and it's helped you better prepare for that appointment and add value. Now you're going to that listing presentation, not from what can I take from them? It's like, how am I adding value? So you add enough value at the presentation, you're going to be the one that ends up taking the listing because you're adding value. So when you're digging for the motivation, pay attention to things where you can add value for them. And also pay attention. Yeah, and also pay attention to things like, for example, like if they say, well, I've got this concern or that concern, those are going to be problems that you can help them find solutions to. So for example, if they say, well, look, I need to relocate out of the area, maybe you can help them find a great agent. If they say, well, look, I'm kind of concerned because I don't have the property ready to come on the marketplace, maybe you can help them prepare the property ready for sale. So it's going to help you prepare for the appointment and what to bring to the appointment and how to present at the appointment as well too.
Agreed. Yeah. I just went on a listing presentation this week. She interviewed 4 people, hired your boy. Let's go. And it was interesting because as we were speaking, she told me that she was making a move across country. I said, great. And, I know that that's a big move. Do you need any help or assistance with actually like boxing stuff up and shipping it or maybe putting stuff into a pod? She's like, yeah, as a matter of fact, I do. I said, great. Well, what I'll do is I'll do a group text just so you know, anybody that I refer you to, there's no financial incentive for me to do that. These are just people that we work with all the time and know and trust. And because we refer them so frequently, they treat our clients exceptionally well and give them very reasonable rates and service. So I will connect you guys in a group text and then you guys could take it from there. And if it works out, great. If not, we can perhaps refer you to somebody else. Would that be helpful or useful to you? Oh yeah, that'd be great. So to your point, as we're asking questions around the move and finding out motivation, it's also a way to try to determine how you can add value above and beyond just helping them transact. So what me and Jose are talking about here is moving away from being transactional to being fiduciary. Transactional is just like, hey, I help you transact, I help you buy and sell. Fiduciary is I help you solve problems, and then I guide, right? And those are 2 different things. And I think the marketplace increasingly is beginning to demand fiduciary versus just transactional. Because if an agent's just going over, they're saying, we're going to take pictures, put a lockbox on, some flyers, and put an MLS and, hope and wish and pray that it sells, you're not adding that much value, and anybody can do that. So to Jose's point, it's really, going above and beyond that. So then we start to shift into time. And the question is why is time important? Well, for those people that are listening, how many people do you speak to and they say, yeah, I want to sell in like 6 months? And you're like, hey, cool. But, at the same time, who would you rather be speaking to? Somebody wants to sell in 6 months or somebody wants to sell in 30 to 45 days? So I need to know this before I go see them instead of running out, getting all dressed up, going in a car and being like, I think I can, and all excited about the presentation. And then you sit down with them and they're like, yeah, we're not going to do anything for 6 to 12 months. We just wanted to get an idea of value. So the questioning there sounds something like, ideally, Jose, in terms of what you want, because really that is what's most important, how soon would you like to actually have the home on the market for sale? And that's a quick, straightforward question. And they're going to give you an answer. It's either going to be ASAP, it's going to be in 30 days, it might be in 6 months, but each one of those is going to have a response. And what I'm looking for is a way of creating urgency, right? So let's say they say to me, well, we're thinking like in the next 90 days. Okay, cool. And then just so I know, is there any particular reason that you wanted to wait 90 days? Like, was there some sort of factor that was inhibiting you doing so? And they're like, yeah, well, we wanted to get it prepared and this and that. It's like, okay, cool. And let's say that we knew that through no fault of your own or mine, just because of some market dynamics and how things have been changing and interest rates going up, dramatically in a short period of time, that if we made a decision to wait, it could end up affecting how much we can get. Would you be open to moving up your time frame so you could take advantage of current market conditions? Or are you committed to waiting the 90 days and then be quiet? And when you do that, something will come back, right? So I'm always trying to listen for that time frame, and depending on the time frame, trying to figure out if there's a way that we can kind of move up the time frame that would be in their best interest if they're open to it.
It's funny, as you were talking, I was like thinking, like, a lot of people look at time and they're like, well, they don't want to sell in a period of 6 months. Well, have you asked them if they're open to moving up the time frame? And a lot of people think like, well, if they want to sell in 6 months, I'm not going to meet with them now until they're closer to doing it. Or they go out, meet with them, give a full listing presentation, and the people aren't ready to do anything. And then they start shopping you around as well, too. Sometimes they're like, well, that guy said he's going to charge me 6%. That guy said he's only going to sell it for 200,000 or 500,000. 6 months later, the market's completely different than it was today. Now properties are worth 10, 20, 30, 40,000 more, or 10, 20, 30, $50,000 less as well too. So I wrote that down as well too, that you can move up the time frame. What I also wrote down is that get clarification, meaning like sometimes people will say, well, yeah, I like to sell my property in around June timeframe. So the way I get clarification on that, when you say June, are we talking about like getting it on the market in June, or are we talking about like actually having it closed and sold by June? Because those are completely two different conversations, No, I like to have it sold by June. It's May 21st today. That's like in like 9-10 days. That's a completely different conversation. And whenever people tell me their time frame, it's always like, okay, great. Well, I want to do something by July. Okay, when you say July, do you want to be closed by July, or are you talking about getting it on the market by then? And then it's also an opportunity to kind of pitch things. So for example, like if they want to have it on the market by August, you can pitch, well, great. If there was a financial benefit to doing something now versus waiting, meaning market transitioning, is that something that you'd be open to? If they say, no, I wouldn't be open to it, it's also an opportunity for you to pitch other things. Like, so for example, they say, no, I want to have it on the market in July and I want to be closed around September. You can pitch a rent back, meaning, well, look, what if we can actually get it on the market now, get you sold, and get the buyer to do some sort of sell or rent back to you? Would you be open to that? The other thing that you can pitch at that time is like a coming soon campaign as well too. Hey, look, I know that you're not wanting to be on the market until September. Have you ever heard of a coming soon campaign? No, I have not. Okay, well, coming soon campaign is very similar to a movie trailer. Have you ever gone to the movies and you see a movie preview of a movie that's coming to theater soon, and you think to yourself, when that movie comes to theaters, I want to see that movie? It's the same thing for real estate. What we do with a lot of our listings is we begin to pre-market our properties prior to them coming on the market. That way, just like a movie preview, we've already got a certain level of interest, and we've already got a certain level of buzz and excitement for your home, so that when it comes on the market, is that something that you're open to? That doesn't mean that you can't take the listing now, and that doesn't mean that they won't sign a contract now. This is the time to plant the seed, or almost start having that conversation, as opposed to having it at the listing appointment when you're presenting a new idea to them. It's enough, well, oh wow, I'd actually be interested in a rent back, or oh wow, I actually consider, or I didn't know I had a rent back available. I would consider a coming soon campaign as well too.
Yeah, I love that. And this is what we're showing. It's just continuing to dissect and continuing to ask more questions. To be clear, what came up for me is precisely what you were describing, the coming soon campaign. And what I will say is, something that we've done very successfully, for sellers just like you, that has produced very favorable outcomes for them, is, let's say we connect and it all makes sense and you feel comfortable and confident. We can take care of the appropriate documentation. We're not going to put it on the market for sale just yet. What we'll do is we'll begin to pre-market the property. We'll let people know via social media and different channels that's getting ready to come on the market. The goal and objective there is to build up a lot of interest, kind of a lot of buzz. So when it is ready in 2 or 3 weeks or a month, we just have the professional photographer come out and we open up the floodgates, and hopefully that results in a lot of showings and offers. I guess I'm curious, is that approach something that you would be open to? And then quiet. And they'll tell you like, yeah, it sounds great. Okay, cool. Right. The other thing is what came up as you were speaking is, so let's say they say 90 days. It's like, all right, well, and tell me this, like, let's say we were able to procure an offer for you in the next 30 to 45, and we can negotiate an extended closing period of maybe, 60 days or something of that nature. Is that a time frame that you would be open to? Yeah, I think we could work with that. Okay, great. And now I'm clear, right? So what me and Jose are both saying is that as we enter into the motivation room, we ask a lot of questions, we dig, we dissect, we don't take surface answers, we're continuing to ask questions. So that way we're very, very clear on the motivation. Like if you hang up a pre-qualification call, or if you're going on a listing appointment and you can't tell me with exact certainty, specifically the why and why it's important to them, then you didn't do a good job of pre-qualifying, and you should reach back out to them and find out before you go see them, right? Because otherwise you're also not able to, understand their situation fully, and then therefore prescribe something that could be in their best interest fully and help them to self-discover what could, be in their best interest. Then we move over to time, and the same thing's happening there, is that me and Jose are not taking surface answers for time. We're continuing to dig, continuing to ask questions to find out, hey, is there an opportunity here to do something sooner rather than later? And then once we're clear on that, the next thing we move over to, for me, is decision makers, right? Because I want to be clear that all decision makers are there. I'm sure we've all been there where we run out to an appointment and we realize that they're like, oh yeah, it's typically the husband be like, my wife's on the deed, but I make all the decisions. And then you get there and they're like, I got to talk to my wife. I'm like, yeah, I knew you had to talk to your wife, bro. Like, why are you flexing like that? You know what I mean? Like, you're not the real decision maker, dude. So I want to make sure that everybody's present. And the way that we ask that question is, I can see here, it looks like there's somebody else on title to the property. Just so I know, I can hear in your voice, you seem to be really excited about selling. How does Jim feel about it? Or how does Susie feel about it? Right? And then just hush, breathe, and listen. And they'll tell you. They'll be like, yeah, she's equally as pumped. She wants to be closer to family. Or yeah, he is the one that's causing me to want to do this move. He has a job opportunity or something of that nature, right? More information will be forthcoming when you ask that question. I saw you write some notes down, so tell me what you got.
I was thinking about price as well too. Like normally I go into like, okay, how much do you want to list the property for at that time? But it's basically the same thing. It's just a different order, because I'm imagining that you ask in regards to price as well too. As it relates to decision makers, I do want to let people know that I have had some exceptions that I make on something like that, where it's like, hey, look, my wife's actually out of town. This is the way I want to do it. I want to meet you first. If I like what you have to say, I'll introduce you to my wife. And in some of those cases, I just want to let you guys know that you are the business owner. You get to make the business decision as to how you want to run your business. Don't make it the rule, but also don't draw a line in the sand, meaning like, nope, I'm not willing to do that. Nope, all decision makers are not there. I'm not going out to that appointment, especially as a newer agent as well too. Like, let's say, dude, you spent 3 weeks prospecting, you finally got a good lead, the guy wants to meet you first, you're like, nope, I'm not going out there. Dude, you don't have anything better to do, like it may as you become more productive, your time becomes more valuable. And as your time becomes more valuable, you want to go into situations where you're being more efficient, and also that increase the chances of you being able to help them do what they want to do as well too. So I just want to give a little bit of a different perspective on that as well too.
Yeah, I think there's accuracy in that, where it's the exception, it's not the rule.
Exception, yeah.
So there's an exception a handful of times. At the same time, if we do that more often than not, then more likely than not, it'll lead to kind of spinning wheels.
Yeah.
And as I get more productive, I know me and you typically are not going to be listing 100 plus homes a year. Like, I'm not going to be meeting with people if all decision makers aren't there. I may make an exception 1 or 2 times out of 150 listings, but it is the exception, right? So once I'm clear on that, we have all decision makers present. Then we start to get into some other questions. Now, Jose mentioned regarding price. Now, the way some people have been trained to do that is, I study prices every day, so therefore I assume you'll list with me at a specific price that'll cause it to sell. Is that correct? And what I'm aware of is that's built in an environment in which consumers didn't have access to data and information. Well, there's this thing called the internet, and that's come around over the last 20, 25 years. And now people have access to data and information. They probably know more about home values than most agents do. I need to understand this thing called Instagram. I'm asking her questions like, hey, sis, what is a story? And how is that different than a post?